Welcome back to another episode of Wavecast. I'm your host, Andi, and we're joined today by Brenda Wanjiku, one of the POGO, or Partnership for Observation of the Global Ocean, scholars currently in residence at the Marine Institute. Thank you so much for joining us today, Brenda.
Thank you for having me. I'm really happy
Yeah.
to be here.
Brenda here is the co-founder, CEO, and director of Nutree Fish, a nutrition company based out of Nairobi in Kenya, which recently was acknowledged as one of the 100 innovators shaping Africa's blue economy by Catapult Ocean. That's super impressive, Brenda.
Thank you so
So,
much.
what does this recognition mean for you and your company?
Again, thank you so much for having me here. It's really, really exciting. And I would just say just that recognition, like being recognized as part of the 100 innovators shaping Africa's blue economy, is a strong validation of the work that we're doing with NutriFish. And it means the work that we're currently doing is relevant, not just locally, but within a broader continental context, if I would say that. It tells me that the challenges we're working on around food systems, around fisheries, around access to nutrition are not isolated. They are part of, a larger pattern across Africa, and I mean across the world. So but at the same time, it also it highlights how early stage the ecosystem still is, because when you look at the blue economy in Africa, it's still very much underfunded, still developing, and a lot of the solutions are happening in quite fragmented ways. So for me, the recognition is less about, arriving somewhere and more about, responsibility. It's a reminder that there's a lot of work that still needs to be done in terms of the systems we're building, and that actually systems that work for the people, for the planet, and for the environment. So I think what I value most is the visibility it creates, not just for NutriFish, but also for the broader space. Because the more the attention we bring to these kind of solutions, the more we can unlock collaboration, we can unlock investment, and more inclusive growth within the blue economy.
That's really awesome. I'm really well, congratulations to y'all on that, and I hope to hear more about where y'all go with this going forward. So we went like straight into the deep end, but for our listeners out there, can you tell us what exactly Nutree Fish is and how y'all came to be?
So NutriFish is an early stage blue economy startup working at the intersection of fisheries, of nutrition and climate. And what we do, like the core angle of NutriFish, is we source fish from small scale fish farmers at around 5 months instead of the typical 10 to 12, which reduces production costs, lowers risk, and significantly cuts post harvest losses. Then we convert that fish into a nutrient dense shelf stable powder that can last up to a year without refrigeration, making it accessible, making it affordable, and of course adaptable across different markets. So NutriFish is really built around one question, right? Which is, how do you make nutrition more accessible using what we already have? In our case, in Africa, fish is abundant. Yeah, but the system around it is inefficient. Farmers typically grow fish for 10 to 12 months, which increases costs. It increases the mortality risk. It also creates a lot of pressure on the value chain. What we do differently is we offtake that fish at around 5 months. So we are essentially cutting that cycle almost in half. And what that does, it reduces the input for our farmers, it gives them earlier income, and also reduces the post harvest losses. Then instead of selling raw fish, we process it into the powdered product that is the shelf stable up to, 12 months, and very much nutrient dense up to 65% protein. And we make it flavored depending on the market segment. So we are not just selling this powdered fish. We are redesigning how value moves through the fish value chain. And I think one of the underlooked sectors when it comes to the blue economy is the last part, which is the value addition part. And that is where NutriFish comes in.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
amazing. Uh, so, like, what sort of fish do y'all end up utilizing from like the local farmers?
So Currently we're just focusing on catfish and tilapia because those are the most common species in like Kenya and East Africa. But obviously when we expand and grow, we're looking into more species like the Nile perch because maybe just to take you to the kind of problem you're solving, you have farmers who are spending more than necessary to grow fish. You have post-harvest losses that can go up to 40% in some contexts. And then on the other side, you still have communities that are protein deficient. So it's this paradox that we're trying to minimize by connecting these two ends more efficiently. So we are working with what we currently have and what is more farmed more in East Africa, which is catfish and tilapia. Yeah.
Got you. Thank you. Thank you. So when you're working with like the processing of these fish, so like the tilapia and the catfish that you were talking about, do you utilize the whole fish in that sort of thing, or do you mainly like focus on like the things that you usually get, like like most like the bio waste?
Nice. We often get that question. So right now, because we are still like in the early stage, our processing is more focused on the edible portions of the fish. So the fillet and the core meat that goes directly into the powder, that's mainly to ensure consistency in quality because if you're in the food sector, one of the main things you have to assure people is the quality of your product, and also to simplify the processing at this stage. But from a systems perspective, we are very intentional about moving toward full utilization of the fish. We are currently working with UNESCO in a program called Youth for Impact. And what we're doing is we pivoted this same solution because when you're processing fish, you generate a lot of waste. So we are repurposing this waste to organic fertilizer to help small scale farmers. Currently, farmers who are doing vegetables. So we've been piloting this with 20 farmers so far, and it's been working good, just repurposing the waste into something more useful. And again, from a system perspective, we are very intentional about moving forward full utilization of the fish. Because if you look at it, a significant portion of the fish, you have the bones, the heads, the trimmings, they are very much underutilized and wasted in most cases. And that's where the circular economy thinking comes in. So those parts can actually be very valuable. For example, you can process them into things like the organic fertilizers I'm talking about. We have a company in Kenya, actually two that I know of, that are processing the same waste into animal feed or even calcium rich inputs, depending on how far you want to go with the processing. So for us, it's a phased approach. Right now, we're optimizing the core product, but also we are scaling. As we're scaling and building more capacity, the goal is to move forward to a zero waste model where we're extracting as much value as possible from the entire fish. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about, this producing this food, it's about maximizing the resources and the efficiency, which also ties into climate and responsible production.
Wow,
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah,
Hmm.
that's something that's been on my mind more recently.
Hmm.
Especially like, just as like kind of an aside, uh,
Yeah.
like, I'm in this Northwest Atlantic fisheries class
Hmm.
right now, and part of it is we do like different modules. And so part of it was talking about like waste processing and that sort
Hmm.
of thing. And so it's not something a lot of people normally think about, but I'm definitely glad to hear that y'all, as well as like other people like within like tangential industries, are taking this more into consideration nowadays.
Yeah,
Um,
and just maybe if I can add to that, I think it's a really really important point that should be going into like conversations, because waste processing is one of those things that sits a bit in the background, but it actually has a huge impact when you look at it in terms of how efficient the system can be. It's interesting you mentioned that because even in our context, a lot of value is lost not because of the resource not because the resource isn't there, but because we haven't fully thought through what happens to everything beyond the primary product. So, um, for example, like in fisheries, people tend to focus on the fillet, right? But when you start looking at the whole fish, you realize there's so much potential that can go into um, all these byproducts. And yeah, so just to acknowledge that, that's nice.
so what do you hmm. So what do you think in this process so far have been some of the biggest challenges for you and your team?
Oh, we could talk about the challenges for like ages. But I think the biggest challenges for us have been around capacity, both in terms of production and both in terms of the systems that currently exist. So on the production side, um, as an early stage startup, there's things like equipment. So there's limited equipment, which means you have to be very intentional about how much we produce and how much we grow. And that has also influence how we think about branding and market expansion, because we don't want to over position ourselves beyond what you can consistently deliver. You have this increasing customer demand, but you also have to produce just enough not to also like stretch yourself or stretch the company. So it's a big problem, I would say. And then on the system side, I think one of the challenges is that we're not just, again, just building this product, we're building a new way of thinking how value is thought of in the value chain. So, for example, the idea of early offtake taking fish at around 5 months instead of the 10 to 12, it makes sense from a cost and efficiency perspective. But it also requires working closely with farmers. It requires building trust. It requires sometimes shifting mindsets around what optimal production looks like. So it's also behavioral and relational. And then I would say that that challenge is, which is more broader, is operating within an ecosystem that is still developing. The blue economy in Africa has a lot of potential. And I say that because we have so much resources, but things like infrastructure, things like financing, and even awareness are still catching up to the growing sector. So you're often building both the solution and the ecosystem around it at the same time. So, but I think for us, those challenges have also shaped how we approach growth. We are very focused on building something that is realistic, something that is adaptable, and of course, scalable over time, rather than trying to grow too quickly without the proper foundation. So, yeah.
Wow. Okay. There's
Hmm.
there's definitely some things there that not that I'm a business expert, but just definitely some things that I never would have even thought of. So,
Hmm.
it seems like, with the recognition that you've been receiving, that you're doing something right.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So, yeah, no, absolutely. So you were mentioning something about the trust that you build with these fish farmers. And so that just got me wondering, like, like, you know, we talked about the accolades that you've received, but how has Nutree Fish been accepted within, or like received within the community, like locally versus like otherwise?
Um, it's interesting and it's a very important question because um, for us and the values we have in Nutrifish, it's the acceptance in the community is actually more important than any external recognition. The recognition you get from your consumers is more, um, important than any external recognition, I would say, quote unquote. And I think in the beginning there was definitely some hesitation, which is understandable. You're trying to bring a new product into the market. You are trying to convince people to buy your product, to buy your idea, and the idea of for example, the of taking fish at around the 5 months instead of the usual 12 months that we're used to is quite different from what farmers are used to. So it wasn't something that we just came in and people immediately adopted it. We had to spend time explaining the model, which is something you have to do, showing the cost implications and really listening to their concerns as well. But what started to shift things was when farmers began to see the numbers. For example, if you reduce the growth period, we are able to bring down the cost of producing 1 kilogram of fish from around 700 Kenyan shillings to about 350 Kenyan shillings. And then farmers see what they can recover their investment earlier and reduce risk, especially things like feed cost and mortality. It starts to make more sense. So I'd say acceptance has been growing gradually, not overnight, but through trust and through demonstration to to our farmers. And I think what's important is what we are not positioning. We are not just like positioning ourselves as buyers, but also partners in the value chain. So it's a two-way relationship. We are also learning from them. We are understanding their realities, and adapting our model accordingly to what their needs are at the same time. And even on the consumer side, there's also a learning curve. Fish powder is not something everyone is immediately familiar with. I would say. So there's also an element of education there, showing how it can be used in everyday meals and why it's very much beneficial. So overall, I would say the reception is has been positive, but you build it over time through engagement, through trust, through proof. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. So like you just mentioned engagement, and so I was wondering like how do you go about increasing engagement with your potential consumer base?
So what has been working for us, we have we're in partnership with an organization, an non-for-profit organization. It's called the Association of Women in Fisheries Blue Economy Kenya, and we have been, they do so many educational retreats. They do so many, um, what are they called? Like showcases, like showcasing your product, and uh, maybe just to say on the consumer side, one of the things we realize. The format that we give our fish powder is not like familiar with everyone. So we just can't put it on a shelf and expect people to immediately understand it. For
Mhm.
example, like kids love Kit Kat. When they see Kit Kats on the shelves, they'll be like, "Oh, I want a Kit Kat." But it's not the same for fish powder. So what we've been doing is focusing a lot on education and demonstration. This comes in so many ways, and like I said, I'm such a believer in collaboration, collaborating with institutions, with other partners doing more or less the same thing. And for you to scale, you also have to ride on, like. One of the ways we are scaling our product right now is partnering with, for example, companies that are already doing baby food products to integrate our powder into the ingredients and all that stuff. So it's about showing people how it can be used in everyday meals, whether it's in porridge, stews, or even blended into different dishes. Because once people see how easy it is to integrate, adoption becomes much easier. And then the second part that has been working for us is segmentation. We don't treat all consumers the same. For example, for households concerned about nutrition, we focus on the health benefits, we focus on the protein, on the omega-3, on the micronutrients. For more urban or younger consumers, we lean more into convenience and even flavor because we have different flavored options. We have a protein shake for gym people, for the health and fitness people, all from the same powder. So it's all about the segmentation on your market and knowing how to reach your market. And then for institutions like schools or hospitals, the conversation is more around cost efficiency and nutritional impact at scale. So the messaging shifts depending on who you're willing to speak to and who you're speaking to. And then I would say the third part is the feedback loops. We often forget this as people in business because when you're still very early stage, you're consistently learning from consumers what they like, what they don't, how they're using the product, what they need you to improve on the product. So that helps us refine both the product and how we communicate it to our different customer segments. So overall, engagement for us is really a mix of education, of targeted messaging, and continuous learning rather than focusing on what is typically known as the traditional marketing way. Yeah.
So I'm something of a gym bro
Mm.
myself, and so it's like you really sparked me with the protein shake sort of
Yeah.
thing. And I think like, you know, it's an interesting variety of products that you sell, which is awesome. So how does one go about like accessing your products?
So very easy. Right now, you just go to our website and then just there's a uh, like a sales section. You just select the product you want, and then it will be delivered to wherever you are. But currently, we just in Kenya and East Africa. Yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
But
For sure.
of course, we are very open to like shipping when we get the proper market. We can ship anywhere, you know. It just depends with
Sure.
the, yeah, how much people want the product, and we can make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one thing, um, I guess tangential to that, I guess with people like knowing how particular people can be with like things like protein shakes, and then
Mhm.
in the same kind of vein, like spice blends and that sort of thing.
Mhm.
I think if you tell people like, "Oh, this is fish powder," or
Mhm.
it's like, incorporates fish powder. I think one of their, uh, I guess there may be like the kind of like lights flickering in their head, like, "Does it taste like fish?"
Mhm. Mhm.
Uh, and so how does that? Because I can imagine like for a spice blend, like, like that's like part of the vibe that you may be going for, but like with the protein shake, like, there may be very few, gym people in their life who maybe want their protein shake to taste like fish.
Yeah, yeah, and that's actually one of the first reactions you get from everyone. It's fish powder, so definitely it smells like fish, it tastes like fish, and you're not alone in that. I mean, I think when people hear fish powder, the immediate assumption is, I think it's going to really, really smell or really, really taste strongly like fish, and that's very valid. It's a very valid concern because taste is it's a big part of adoption. I mean, if you want people to adopt to your product, then the taste has to meet what they're looking for. So from the beginning, we've been very intentional about how we process and how we formulate the product. On the processing side, we focus on reducing strong odors through proper handling, drying, and grinding techniques. So you're not getting that overpowering fish profile. Actually, as part of our product, we have a powder that is and totally tastes like it smells and tastes like fish. So we call it the unflavored powder for people who want it as it is. And then we
Mhm.
have now the other product, the pivoted product that we introduce later, which is the taste, the flavors, the spicy blends, the sweet blends. So back to my point is we've been very intentional about this. And if you look, or rather if you just research on why most people don't eat fish, it's because of the smell or because of the taste. So we have been very intentional about this, and we've developed both unflavored and flavored options. So the flavored version is designed to blend easily into meals. So when you add it into something like porridge or stew, it doesn't um, dominates that it just enhances the nutritional value. It's really, really amazing. And then for people who are more like particular with the protein shakes or spice blends, we've created flavored versions where the taste profile is more familiar, so you're not experiencing it as fish but as a complete product. So it's really about meeting people where they are, and I would say that's one of the key lessons we've learned. You meet people where they are, because at the end of the day, no matter how nutritious something is, if people don't enjoy consuming it, then they won't adopt it. So we take that very seriously in how we design the product. Yeah.
Sure. No, that makes
Hmm.
total sense. Thank you. Thank
Hmm.
you. Uh, this is not like a small endeavor. One thing that floats in my mind is like you've clearly put a lot of thought into this, and like, you're talking about how much you're learning throughout the process. So it's like, how long have you actually been at this for?
So the concept was in 2024, like working on the idea, working on the product, making sure you have minimum viable products. But then I would also say the idea and the thinking behind it started before that. It came from really looking at the gaps in like fisheries and food
Mhm.
systems, especially around post-harvest losses and access to nutrition, and asking how these two could be connected like more efficiently. And since we started, I would say since 2024, it's been a very iterative process. For example, we've been able to like generate over, I would say, 15,000 right now in revenue so far, which for us is less. about the amount and more about validating that people are willing to actually buy and use the product. And then beyond that, a lot of the time has gone into learning, into understanding the process, into working with people on the ground, which is your farmers, because without the farmers, then you have no fish, and without fish, you have no end product. So yeah, testing different product formats and then refining how we communicate the idea. So it hasn't really been linear, but the idea, the concept began in 2024. And it's been a lot of experimenting, adjusting, and improving along the way. And I think um, that's what defines this stage. Just it's not just about building the product, it's about building the model and understanding what actually works in practice. Yeah.
I guess one thing I'm curious about, is there anything that you would have done differently from where you are now to when, like February 2024?
I like that question. Is there anything I would have done differently? A very reflective question again. I think one thing I would have done differently is starting validation a bit earlier and to be more deliberate with validation. In the beginning, you spend like so much time thinking through the model, refining the idea, and trying to get it right, which you never do until you start doing it um, before putting it out there. But what I've learned is that you actually learn much faster once you are in the market, even with something that's not perfect. So if I was to go back to around February 2024, I would probably start testing my idea, my solution earlier, even like on a smaller scale, um, with a smaller target market, just to get
Mhm.
real feedback sooner. The second thing I would probably do different is around capacity planning. I think initially we were very focused on the product itself, but as you start operating, you realize that production capacity, equipment, and logistics are as critical. So I would have thought about scaling infrastructure a bit earlier, which again is difficult if you have limited resources, or at
Mhm.
least plan for it more intentionally. And then I would say that thing is around maybe stakeholder engagement, building trust with farmers, building trust with consumers, building trust with your partners. It takes time, and it's something that benefits from being started early. So I would have engaged even more proactively from the beginning, not just to introduce the idea, but also try and co-develop it with them. It's easier when you do it with people. It's easier when you collaborate with people. But overall, I wouldn't necessarily call them mistakes. It's more like
Mm.
adjustments because, I mean, each step, even the slower ones, they helped us understand the system better. And I think that's what has shaped us and how we're building now. Yeah.
Thank you
Hmm.
for that. Ultimately, like you were saying,
Hmm.
ultimately, like you're in it looks like a pretty good spot, at least me looking at it from an outside lens. In that sense, like, what are you most proud of?
Um, I've mentioned so many things, and I think what I'm most proud of is I wouldn't tame it as a single milestone, but the fact that we started and stayed with it, even when things were not fully clear, because in the beginning you don't have a full roadmap of where you're going, what you're doing. You have an idea, you have some assumptions, and a lot of uncertainty. And I think just moving from that stage to something that is now generating revenue, to something that is now engaging farmers and being recognized externally, that transition is something I don't take lightly. And then more specifically, I would say I'm proud of how we've approached the problem. We didn't just focus on creating a product, we tried to understand the system. You look at things like why farmers are holding fish for 10 to 12 months, where costs are accumulating, where losses are happening, and then you design a model that actually responds to that. And I think that mindset has shaped everything else because you're consistently learning not just about the business, but also about the people, but about decision making, about handling uncertainty. And then there are moments where things don't go as planned. There will be so many. If you're in business, you plan A and then it doesn't go as you planned, you know. There's moments you realize you don't have all the answers and you still have to move forward. So I think for me, the biggest thing is resilience, but also clarity, the clarity that came with that, and the ability to keep going while also becoming more intentional about how you build, about how you look at things from different perspectives. And I think that's something that I'm still developing, but it's something I'm really, really proud of so far.
That's really inspiring. Thank you. So I did some, before our chat, I did some
Hmm.
snooping on your website. And so one of the things that I noticed on there is that you have this tagline like towards like the bottom of some of your pages where it says a world where fish is more than food. I was wondering like what does that mean to you in a world like our own where people don't always think about fish much beyond, like, what they see on the shelves or, like, on their plate.
I would say that was a very, very intentional line. And when we say a world where fish is more than food, we are really talking about shifting how we think about fish beyond just consumption. Because if you look at it, fish is not just a source of protein, you know. It sits at the center of livelihoods. We have people who practice small scale and large scale fishing for their income. So it sits at the center of livelihoods, at the center of ecosystems, at the center of nutrition, and even climate. So, for example, for small scale farmers, fish is income, it's stability, it's part of their economic resilience. For consumers, especially in regions facing protein gaps and malnutrition, which is one of the problems we aim to solve with NutriFish. For them, it's not just food, it's a very dense source of nutrients that can significantly impact their health outcomes. So, and then when you zoom out, fish is also part of a much larger environmental system. How it's produced, how it's processed, how it's distributed has implications for resource use, waste and climate. So that statement is really about seeing fish as part of a larger system rather than just a product. And I think for us, NutriFish sits in that space of trying to unlock more value from that system, whether it's through reducing losses, whether it's improving the access to nutrition, or thinking about the circular use of resources. It's about asking how far we can extend the impact of something that is often taken for granted. So, yeah, it's a simple line, but it carries a lot of what we are trying to build.
Yeah, it definitely does, and it's like when
Mhm,
when you were describing it and, like, and, like, me kind of, like, at the start of my kinda, like, fisheries career right now, it's like
mhm.
it's it's very emotional, more than I thought that ever could be necessarily, and I don't know Like, I don't know if that's, like, something that you feel when you're talking about that, but that's kind of, like, what I got when you were explaining it, and kind of, like, that general thought, at least for me, kind of is very similar to part of the reason I wanted to go into fishery science to begin with. Um, and so it was very resonating, and I don't know if any of our listeners are gonna really relate to that at all.
I mean, I think it's something we can all resonate with at some point or to some extent. And uh, uh, it is, I mean, especially once you start seeing the human side of it and the effects it can have, because for me, it's not just, the ecosystem or the data, or it's people's livelihoods, it's communities, it's food on the table. And I think for me, that's when it shifted, when it stopped being just something I was studying and it became something I could see the real world impact of. And even now, when I talk about Nutrifish or the value chain, there's always that layer in the background. So because again, you're not trying to build only a product, you're trying to interact with people's realities, their risks, their opportunities. So I don't think it's a bad thing at all. If anything, I think that emotional connection is what makes the work more intentional, because you become more intentional towards what you're building. It makes you think more carefully about the decisions you're making and the kind of systems you're building. So yeah, I would say it's actually a really important part of the journey, and maybe some of the listeners will resonate to this as well.
Hope y'all
Yeah.
listeners take something away from this.
Yeah.
Uh,
I think the more you
that's
understand the system, the more you realize it's not just technical, it's deeply human depending with how you look at it. Whatever system you're looking at, not just the fisheries or the ocean system, it's depending with how you look at it. Yeah.
yeah, big time. I think like
Mhm.
that's one of the things that ultimately throughout just like being like the host of this podcast is like something that I'm taking away from this is just
Mhm.
like getting into uh getting in touch with all like these people like these different fields of either like maritime studies or fishery science and all of like the other interconnected things. It's like there is just like this theme kind of like that I'm pulling out of it of like of community and this humanness. And it's really touching in a lot of ways. And so, thank you for being a part of that. I do have
Yeah.
a couple more questions for you. Um, do you have any particular advice that you would give to people thinking about their own startups, especially those in like the blue economy sector?
Yeah. One of the biggest advice, it doesn't really matter on the sector or the the ecosystem you're building in, is to stay curious, but also stay very much grounded to the cost, to the reason why you want to start something. Because in fields like fisheries or ocean science or even entrepreneurship itself, there's so much complexity, and it's easy to feel like you need to have everything figured out before you move forward. But what I've learned is that you get clarity as you go on. That clarity actually comes from engaging with the work, with asking questions, with interacting with the people you want to serve, with trying things out, and being okay with not having all the answers at the beginning. We all can't know everything in the beginning. We figure it out. And then the second thing is to pay attention to the human side of what you're doing, taking me back to my tagline. Whether you're working with data or ecosystems or building something, there's always people connected to it. And understanding that changes how you approach problems, it makes you more intentional and more thoughtful. And I think the last thing is to think in systems and try to go beyond just what is in front of you and ask, how does this connect to something bigger, because that's where you start to see opportunities, and you try to understand things, and also you try to improve them. So yeah, I would say stay curious, stay connected to people, and don't be afraid of to learn by doing. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you.
Hmm.
Thank you. And so, what do you think we can look forward to seeing from Nutree Fish in the future?
That's a great question. A very, very great question. Um, I think in the near term, you can expect a lot of refinement, a lot of expansion of what we already have. So improving our process capacity, making the products more consistent, improving our product line, having more products on the line, and expanding how people can actually access them, which is something we are currently working on, whether that's through direct channels or eventually retail and institutional partnerships. And then on the product side, we are continuing to build out the different lines that I'm talking about. We want to make sure that NutriFish has a product for everyone, whether it's like the fitness people, whether it's babies, it's pregnant moms and expectant moms, lactating moms, everyone, literally have a product for everyone. Yeah, so things like the flavored powders, the protein shakes, and really tailoring them to different consumer segments, whether it's households, the schools, or even just health conscious markets like the fitness communities I'm talking about. But I think beyond that, the bigger vision is really takes me back to systems. We want to scale the early offtake model in a way that supports more scale fish farmers and improve their cash flow and reduces inefficiencies across the value chain. Because if that part works at scale, it has a ripple effect on affordability, on access, and even sustainability. Because one of the main goals of NutriFish is to make our product as affordable as um as it can get. So, and then the longer term is we are also very interested in moving towards more circular approaches. So looking at how we can utilize more parts of the fish to reduce waste even further and create additional value systems along the way, whether that's fertilizers or other byproducts, like the organic fertilizers we are currently piloting. So I would say the future of NutriFish is really about scaling what works, deepening the impact we currently have, and building a system that is both efficient and very much inclusive, not just growing as a company, but also strengthening the entire ecosystem around it. Yeah.
Amazing. That is fantastic, and I love it, and I can't wait to see how y'all blossom from here on out.
Stay tuned.
I will. Is there anything else that you wanted to let our viewers know about you, your journey, or the company that we haven't really touched on yet?
Um, Only one thing I'd add is what we are building is still very much in progress. And I say that intentionally, because I think sometimes people only see the polished version of things, the recognition, the products, the milestones, but behind that, there's a lot of learning that goes into place, a lot of iterations, a lot of moments where you're figuring things out as you go. And I think that's something I've come to appreciate, not just in entrepreneurship, but even in science. You don't start with all the answers. You build them over time through engagement, through failure, and through curiosity. And for me, that's really what this journey represents. And on the NutriFish side, we are trying to build something that is practical, something that works for farmers, for consumers, and contributes in a small but meaningful way to how we think about food systems and the blue economy. And then on a personal level, I'm really interested in staying at that intersection between science and application and understanding systems, but also translating them into solutions. And so I think if there's one thing I'd leave with, it's that a lot of the work happening in this space is still early, but it's still very much full of potential. And it's going to take people who are willing to engage with both the complexity and the opportunity to really move the sector forward. Yeah. So that's what I'd share.
Amazing. Thank
Mhm.
you so much, Brenda. And thank you for, again, for joining us today. It's really, really inspiring and amazing to see Nutree Fish and you out here making a difference in these communities that has been historically very neglected. And so then just hearing about your journey has been really, yeah, like inspiring. And it's, definitely something that we can all like take a page out of and then stick it in our own books, I guess, if that makes sense. So thank you for being here and telling
Yeah.
us all
Thank you.
that.
I appreciate that. And honestly, I think what you're doing as well, like creating these kind of conversations and bringing different voices together, is just as important, because the more we share these stories, the more we listen from people's perspectives, the more we start to see how interconnected everything is and how much potential there is in this ocean space. And I think for me, it's just about continuing to build, to learn, and to contribute in whatever way we can. And so, yeah, thank you. You too for creating this space and for having me. It's been a great conversation.
Yay.
Yeah.
Yippee. Yeah. And so this has been Wavecast, everyone. We had Brenda Wanjiku joining us today talking about Nutree Fish, and this is Andi. And thank you to all of you listeners for your continued support. If there's a story that you want to tell us, or you have one that you want to learn more about, please reach out to us over the Marine Institute's social media pages or by email at wavecast@mi.mun.ca. This, of course, is Andi signing off for now, but until the next episode, stay wavy, my fronds.